Hello everyone. My name is Antonio Zita, and I'm a member of the EOSC Secretariat, and I'm here to talk to you about data management plans and data management planning, and the tool that we are using in the national data infrastructure, which is Data Stewardship Wizard for creating data management plans. But that is quite a lot of unfamiliar words, I presume. Is that correct? So let me ask you this way: Who has heard the term data management plan or DMP? Can you raise your hands? Quite a few of you, okay? And who has heard the term Data Stewardship Wizard or DSW? One person in the very back. 2 people, 3 people. Wonderful. Who is familiar? Not who has heard data management plan, but who is familiar with the term who's familiar with data management plans? No one, okay. And Data Stewardship Wizard, no one, 0.5, maybe half a person. I saw this little hand sign there. And I presume also Data Stewardship Wizard, probably not a lot. So this brings me to look at the contents so that you know what to expect from today's. I said presentation at the beginning. This is not a correct term. I'll be talking quite a bit about some stuff, but of course you'll be getting your hands dirty and playing around with this Data Stewardship Wizard tool. And so it will be also a practical session, and I'm very happy that you have all your laptops here. And oops, this Windows sound never announces anything good. Okay, let me try, oh right, yes, press the wrong button. Okay. So I'll talk about the outline first. As you see, number 2, we will revise something about fair data. My colleague, Michal Ružička, was here just a few weeks ago. Who has visited that presentation? Raise your hands. About a third of you, okay. So it's good we have a revision there, but I don't want to dwell on it too much. We'll talk about data management plan, and I'll contrast it with data management planning, and I'll explain that very quickly. I have an introduction to Data Stewardship Wizard as a tool, and there are some practical parts, actual exercises. We'll see on your mood. I know it's Friday early afternoon. We'll see. I'll try to gauge your interest in this, but I like to spend some time on that so that you become familiar with the tool, know what it can do, and perhaps know what it cannot do, or things which it cannot do yet. Brief talk about the future developments of Data Stewardship Wizard, and then lastly, what kind of support is there for data management? What can you do if you feel this is still overwhelming? Is there anything or anyone that can help you? Now, if you were paying attention, you may have noticed one thing. I skipped one thing. Which was it? The very first one, yes, thank you very much. The road to fair data. I didn't have it in the original version of the presentation, but I realized that it may be a good idea to add it there. And why? The answer is simple. I will briefly talk about how we got to this term fair data and data management plans. And why, so that you understand this is not a decision of some bureaucrats, that you researchers need to do more things outside of research and have therefore less time for research. But I'd like you to understand that this has evolved naturally from research itself. And research as a whole found the need for these to happen. So we will begin with a very brief overview of this little section called the road to fair data. And then we'll talk about these, what it is, and so on and so on. All right. And now I pressed the correct button. Wonderful. So the road to fair data, there will be different opinions on this, but we can definitely trace it to what we call the replication crisis, which I presume is a term you're familiar with. You can see the term replication crisis. Sometimes you can see also the term reproducibility crisis. I'll talk about these in a bit. But generally, in the mid-2010s, what we saw was a spread of problems of replicating research, first in psychology, then also medicine, economics, political science. Meaning, we can get the research, we can replicate the research even in, from prestigious journals, from reliable scientists. We can achieve the same results. As I mentioned, you can hear also the term reproducibility crisis. This time this is a little excerpt from Nature, from a survey in 2016. So at the very beginning of what is called a reproducibility or replication crisis. And what Nature did was they surveyed the researchers, and they had 1,500 answers, and you see that 90% agree that there is a problem with how we do research. That's basically the answer, right? If we can reproduce or replicate our data, and just a note, reproducing is using the same data sets as the original research and going through the same processes. Replicating is using the same processes to get your own data sets on the same kind of data. But oftentimes these can be also used interchangeably. Basically, researchers say, well, that's a problem. If we cannot get to the same results, it's a problem. The question was, what was the cause of this issue, right? Why can't we, even in Nature articles, why can't we get to the same results that the research team in this publication got? And the same survey, they asked researchers what kind of factors do they believe that contribute to irreproducible research, which you see on the left. The darker red is always factor which always or often contributes. The slightly brighter is which sometimes contributes. You'll notice that among the top ones, we have factors which we can attribute to academia and research as a whole, how we do research. We as researchers, we can have selection bias. We can report only things which work, right? We are oftentimes pressured to publish, otherwise what's the danger, right? We perish. We perish, right? That's the danger if we don't publish enough. But also, roughly toward the middle, you'll see issues like the methods or the code that is used wasn't available. Or that we can get actually the raw data. We can work with the raw data. We can't check the raw data that we have from the original lab. And this got us on the road to fair data. This is a little excerpt from an article titled, "The Replication Crisis Has Led to Positive Structural, Procedural, and Community Changes," from the Communication Psychology Journal in 2023. I don't want you to read the whole thing, just the middle part, the one in bold. At the same time, the crisis has provided a unique opportunity for scientific development and reform. So it's not a crisis, it's an opportunity to do science better, and that's what we want to do, right? And how do we do research better? How can we improve this? There were different ideas on how we achieve this. One was the so-called idea of open access and open science or open data. Have you ever heard this term before? Yeah? Right. So this was roughly mid-2010s, where we had a large push of open. This was already starting before, but after this, we had a large push to open access journals and open data and open science. And this is where we're getting to the difference between fair data and open data, and what is fair and what is open. There were some issues with that. Sure, if you upload your spreadsheet with all the results, but you don't provide an annotation of the different columns or explanation, then I got the data, but I don't understand what is in the spreadsheet. If you're getting data from a microscope, raw data, in a file format which is not common in the discipline, I mean, I have the raw data, but I can't open it because because it is on a very expensive machine, and I don't have the software to actually access that kind of file format, and so on and so on. which gets us to what we have here, this little chart that we started to talk about not open data, data which is open, available to all, but fair data. And this is something that my colleague Michal talked about a few weeks ago, but I'll go through this a little bit, and you'll see why. Fair data follows these 4 principles, meaning that the data doesn't have to be necessarily open, but it should be findable. I need to find it to actually work with it. It needs to be accessible. Once I find it, there needs to be a means of accessing the data. Interoperable, so ideally in a machine actionable or machine readable format, and format on which other tools can use for their purposes. Things like repositories, for example, can incorporate them. And reusable, meaning standardized data in formats which are common in your fields, and with some sort of license which says what I can do with those data, with that data. It also follows the principle, which is quite important, and it says, as open as possible, as closed as necessary. So ideally, you should try to open your research to as many people as you can, but if you have to close it in some fashion, that's fine. So you see that fair data doesn't have to be open data. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. This is one of the important points. I'll talk about this in more detail in a bit. But let's move to the FAIR principles in more detail. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I will spend some time on that. So again, findable. Ideally, and it needs to be findable for people and machines. So if there's a database, ideally it can be automated, and for the database to search what you want, and it automates from different repositories, for example. And of course, ideally, a persistent identifier, right? Like a DOI, for example, or a handle. Because websites change, and when websites change, the URL can change. But ideally, this persistent identifier always identifies where the data is, even though the website may have been gone already. Accessible. Apart from things like standard protocols, there needs to be some sort of login, authentication, possible. Interoperable, again, data and metadata in machine-readable open formats, ideally. And finally, reusable, I think I've dwelt on it quite a bit, but industry standard and usable formats is, sorry, I'll try to use the function here. Oh, yes, wonderful. You should see the right pointer over there. And of course, a license. License tells me what I can do with the data. Can I use it for commercial purposes or not? Right? So notice this little point on the top of reusable. It's the goal. Ideally, it's the goal. We improve research, we improve science if we use someone else's data, and if it's good data, I can use it because it's already there. The data is already there. Why dwell on just the publications as the main outcome of the research when a lot of work was put into the data as well? Why not share it and use it for other research? This may look a bit frightening, right? Can I see some nods or nays? Yeah, it's a lot. But basically, all these FAIR principles can be separated into several ones. It's total. And these are basically several questions. I think these are 22, 23 questions that can be answered. Things like which usage or license you use for metadata records and datasets, and so on and so on. This is not a way of breaking down the FAIR principles, but the point is, your data doesn't have to be necessarily open, but researchers need to be able to find it, access it, and then use it on their, ideally, software, and also understand what the data is. It should be standardized in some fashion. This also leads us to this little circle, which I also believe Michal has, and Michal had in his slide, maybe in a slightly different coloration. But this is quite an idealized, a little bit of idealized life cycle of data. And since we're looking at reusing data, we're looking at a new paradigm. We have this in a little wheel, from planning data to collecting data, processing data to preserving and sharing data. Questions like, what is the process I use for collecting data? Where is data? Where is it stored? Is it on a secure location someplace, or do I carry it on a flash drive I can forget in a tram or a bus? Is it preserved? Does it have cold storage, and so on and so on? It is a complex task, managing the data. And therefore, it's very important to get to good practices from the very beginning. And this is where, and this is slowly we're moving to why we're doing this data management planning. So quick revision of FAIR data. How we got here was from trying to make research better. Another reason why we do it is that it's also required. You should have FAIR data, not only by law, which is the MEYS, is the Ministry of Education and Sports. It has been added to the sorry, I don't think I have it here, apologies, but to the law which will start from 2027. The amendment will start taking place from 2027. But also all the other funders require you to verify your data in some fashion. Sorry about this. This is only in Czech. But this is the website from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports. And it lists all the different funders or providers, which, if you notice again, they say here, the Technological Agency of the Czech Republic, the research data needs to be according to these FAIR principles. Same for the Agency for Health Research in the Czech Republic, and so on and so on. Sometimes it is confusing, or it can be confusing how open and FAIR data are described, which this is a screenshot from, oops, and I think that's not the updated version of the slide, my apologies, but it should be in English. And this part over there, it says that the open data fulfill the FAIR principles, which is not true, right? We have open data and FAIR data. It doesn't have to be the same thing. Okay. Where do data management plans come into play here? So I talk about requirements. Well, they are also required. So that's one thing why we do them, which of course is not the reason why we should be doing them, but these are required by funders such as the Grant Agency of Czech Republic, Technological Agency, and so on and so on. Also, by law, will require the law will require you to also have data management plans. And the link over here, which you can access at the EOS website. If you go to eos.cz, Data Stewards in the Czech Republic, you have a link to a table containing requirements of most of the funders on the DMPs. And these DMPs, you'll be submitting them a couple of times. At the beginning of the project, generally 1 or 2 updates, generally a final DMP. But why do we do this little DMP, right? There's a difference between data management plan and data management planning. Data management plan is just a document that you create in some fashion, and you describe what kind of data you have. And what kind of data means here, what are, for example, what kind of data according to the FAIR principles do you have? So where I can find your data, what kind of repository you have, how much data do you have, what kind of data formats do you have, for example. But that's not the goal. The point here is this little process called data management planning. You have a set of principles. You can consider these as questions, things that should be answered about your research data. And since you have these principles, it allows you to ask yourself, okay, so how do we manage storage? Do we have storage solution in place? Do we use, what kind of metadata format do we use? Are we certain, we have enough storage for the volume of data we have? And that's it. That's the point. The data management planning is a process which should help you understand what kind of research data you have. And by the way, as you go, you just put them in that document. But the point is not to have a document that satisfies, some bureaucrat someplace. The point is to come up with a process which helps researchers better understand what kind of research data they have, and therefore better share them so that others can use them better. That's the point. So that's how we got from replication crisis over and past open data and fair data to DMPs and data management planning. The point is to try to, we do it as a one possible solution of how we can achieve better results when it comes to reproducing data and replicating data. We're nearing the practical session. But before that, let me talk about some common data management plan myths. I think in about 10 minutes, you'll be playing with your keyboards and typing on the keyboards first quite a little bit. But before that, data management plan myth number 1, the DMP cannot be changed. It's a document, you fill it in, and that's it. It's a living document. The point is to present you with some sort of questions that you answer as you continue research. You are not expected to answer every single question at the very beginning of your project when you even haven't started, in the first few months, when you even haven't really started gathering data, for example. You won't have the answers. You won't necessarily know how much data you will have. You may not know if there will be a field-specific repository for your kind of data by the time you're finished with your research. Because, and for those who have been here, who were here a few weeks ago, my colleague talked about the repositories that we are building for the National Repository Platform and so on. So it's a living document. You write what you know currently. If you don't know the name of a specific repository where you put your data, that's okay. That's why it has several phases that you're expected to hand it in. At the beginning, you just write, well, we'll put it into a good field-specific repository that we will find, and that's okay. At the end, of course, you should know what the repository is. Okay, that should look differently, the colors. I'm not sure what's going on with these PowerPoint, but I blame Microsoft, that's for sure. Myth number 2, the DMP should contain only the correct solutions, which now, when I press, it should only now appear in red, and then if I press it again, you should only then see the green bullet point. Now, of course, you write your answers. You write how you handle data. You're not trying to please, again, some anonymous face in a funding agency. You're writing what you do with data. This will be very field-specific. This will be very research-specific. A solution that makes sense for you may not make sense for another researcher or a different field. It's also possible that as you write an answer and you realize later, well, perhaps we can do things differently, and that's the point. That's why you're doing it. Not to please someone, but to please yourself with your research and make your research slightly better. Fair data must always be open data. If you remember that little visualization, that's true, right? You can definitely decide to embargo your data, especially if you're looking for, for example, to get something patented, or if you have another commercial viability of the data possible. You can also not publish data if you have, I'm not sure if it's the case with you here, but plenty of fields work with sensitive or personal data, which cannot be published, right? It needs to be anonymized. And so fields like sociology, psychology, also medicine, right? Won't be publishing all kinds of data. You can't. You can also set up, we talk about accessing the data. You can also set up different conditions for accessing data. There can be research where perhaps you can have someone access the data only after they sign in, using some sort of, using their credentials, for example, university credentials. And if they want to really access your data, maybe you can have them submit a request with an approval of their ethics committee. Because you're handling with sensitive data, but you also understand that this data, it was a big project, could be very useful to someone else. So it's a sliding scale. It's not yes or no. There are options. And you choose whichever works best for you. Sorry about the colors. Oh gosh, I spent so much time setting up the animations. Anyways, DMP, myth number 4, completing DMP in Microsoft Word is easier. And perhaps I can go, oops, I can skip a few slides ahead. Maybe I shouldn't have, but yeah, this is generally how the Word document looks like. Several chapters, I think there's like 6 or 7 chapters with open-ended questions. And let me go quickly back to myth number 4. Generally is not easier because it can lead to issues what some funding agencies say or the project managers say that sometimes the researchers, because it's an open-ended question, you can write anything there, right? And therefore, researchers sometimes tend to write long answers, which they don't have to, or sometimes they answer things that do not really provide the answer that the person is looking for. Okay, finally, the last myth. DMP is useful only for the funding agencies. I'm of the opinion that data management planning, which is the process of asking yourself questions, and by the way, filling out the document, but the planning is also useful for researchers. And I'll talk about some examples in a bit. But basically, DMP, put simply, you're asking yourself the question in the top left. Will I create data? What kind of data? What standards I will use? Will this data be open, meaning available to all or not? Where will it be? And these are the major parts that you should be addressing in the DMP. Things like how sensitive data is, because if you have, sensitive personal data, you will probably follow some laws, regulations. What kind of formats, what kind of standards are you following? Generally, industry standards, following is the best. How much data do you have? Licenses, where are you storing the data as you work on your project? Where will you store data once the project is done? You'll also notice that the repository is kind of offset. You also need to think about your repository, but generally, once you have an idea about your repository, a lot of these questions should be, ideally answered for you already. In other words, DMP's document, which should make the following thing clear. Yes, we know how to handle our data. Yes, we will create data in these and these formats and quantities. And yes, we want our data to be fair because we are preserving it. We may be allowing access to it. And we want to increase value of our data. That's why we are making data fair, right? We're increasing the value because others can use it. And because we have good data, and we spend time annotating them, that will make easier for others to use this. Yes, we will use repositories, and so on and so on. Yes, you have a question.
What does secondary data mean?
Yes, maybe can we put This person on mic?
Sorry, so the secondary data, what does it mean in this context?
So what I meant here is that we are reusing someone else's data. And you're using a data set that we haven't created, but we're using it also for our research. What are some examples of DM planning that I've encountered while I was helping researchers and research groups with their DMPs? This will be, I believe, second to last slide, and then we'll talk about this Data Stewardship Wizard and what it is, and what it isn't, what it can do for you. I was consulting with a researcher, and they were doing it was sociological research. And what they were doing, they were gathering questionnaires, they were recording it on audio-video files. Then they were transcribing this into a text file. Then they were pseudonymized this text. So they removed all possible personal data, but pseudonymized data is a data where you have a key. So a person with the key can identify that data, but someone has the pseudonymized data and someone else has the key. And then they were analyzing the transcripts. And what they realized is that even though they knew they want to do it, they had gaps in how they want this pseudonymization to happen, because they wanted to hire students to transcribe the video and audio files for them, but they were missing the part that they need to submit. They need to file with them a confidentiality agreement. The transcribers need to say, hey, I'm not going to be sending this information out in any way. That needs to be done. Otherwise, that could be quite an issue. Example 2. Researchers are now willing to choose a server without backups for their archiving as the server, and what I mean here, as they were working on their project and gathering data. Why? Because they built their own server at their own institution, at their department. That's how it was done for years. But they actually didn't know whether it has backups or not, and it did not do any backups. And through questioning whether they have backups, we chose a different archival solution for them. And finally, researchers had data which they believe has commercial application. They didn't want to share. They were very anxious about all this talk about sharing data, and they didn't know what to do. This time, the solution was simple. We wrote something like, due to the sensitive nature of all the outputs, their publication is not planned. The data will serve as a basis for obtaining a utility model, because they were working with a few companies on some sort of solution, for machinery, I believe. And this is how we help, for example, just some examples of how we help researchers during their task of data management planning. Just asking questions about how we do these things, what I do with this data, what kind of data I have. And also, one more. Researchers didn't know much about storage costs and persistent identifiers, and again, we alleviated their questions by saying, well, your repository provides this all for free. Don't worry about this. You just have a dozen of gigabytes. That's not an issue. So we talk about data management planning, and this is the document that you could follow as you try to address the questions you have or someone else may have about your research and your research data. Another alternative is to use the tool Data Stewardship Wizard. So we're getting to the DSW maybe a little tiny bit later than I thought, but that's okay. We still have plenty of time left. So Data Stewardship Wizard is a questionnaire open source tool. The open source is underlined. It will be a bit important. Questionnaire is that basically you're being asked questions and you select the answers. Most of the time it's going to be multiple choice. Couple of times you input something in. Generally you won't have any long long open-ended answers. It's not a tool that just, is being recommended as a random tool, but is recommended not only in Horizon Zero Program Guide, but also in the Elixir infrastructure, which is focused on life sciences. So it has its users, and it has proven to be a reliable tool on this. It also helps you track fair metrics. I'll show you some example of that in a bit. It allows you to filter questions by using tags, or you basically select what kind of questions you're looking for. We'll get to that in a bit. It is connected through various databases where it allows you to validate, for example, your ORCID, your DOI. It has various templates where different institutions can use it and accommodate it to their needs. And finally, it also allows you to create a document as well. And how do you gain access to DSW? Well, first of all, if you are part of your institution is part of the Elixir infrastructure, that's how you can gain access to the Data Stewardship Wizard. It's open source, anyone can access it. I presume you are not part of the Elixir infrastructure, so you won't have access there. It's open source, so if you're not part of Elixir, until recently, you had two different options. First of all, since it's open source, you can have your own institutional instance, which you do, for example, at Maastricht University. So at Maastricht University, we have our own instance where we manually load these are called knowledge models. That's basically a thing describing how the questionnaire is going to look like, how the questionnaire form is going to look like, and what's the relationship between different questions. However, that also means it also allows you to make any other modifications, but also that means that you need to have the manpower. You need to have someone who is knowledgeable of GitHub and how Data Stewardship works to manage it. It's not a lot of work, but it needs to be followed and maintained. If your institution doesn't have this kind of person, another solution was what is called Fair Wizard, and I believe that is also an option you have here at your institution. It's pretty much the same thing as Data Stewardship Wizard, with some minor differences. What is important here is that it's a commercial service. If you are not an Elixir institution and you do not have the personnel to maintain Data Stewardship Wizard for you, you can just simply pay and things will be provided for you, which again has its advantages and disadvantages. Now, I said it was until recently. So a few weeks ago, we have also launched in the National Repository Platform the Data Stewardship Wizard in the National Repository Platform. You can find it at dmp.eosg.cz, and we will soon go there. Just give me perhaps, my apologies, a minute or two. The knowledge model looks slightly different than the knowledge model for the other instances, but it still fulfills the same needs that the regular one does. What is important here is, well, two things, even though I've highlighted only one. It says here, it's still in pilot mode. So we are still, in pilot mode, we're still testing things. Things are maybe a bit, maybe a bit rough around the edges, but it's already accessible, and it's accessible to everyone within the infrastructure, which should be virtually every research institution in the Czech Republic. Okay, so how do you get there? And I'll be showing you the slides here just to get the basic feeling of Data Stewardship Wizard. But what I'd like you to do is to go to dmp.eosg.cz. And this is the English page that you'll find, if you have the Czech one, it will be in Czech, but you'll have a button here which will say, in Czech, začít plánovat. In English, it's going to be start planning. And so, hit it, and you should get to this screen. Anyone else not there? Once you go to dmp.eosk.cz in a browser, this is the address over here, and you click this little red button, Start Planning, you'll get to this screen. Everyone there? Okay. Now, we are working on simplifying the process here, but I need you to do this part here. Even if you are already registered in the eInfra services, I still need you to register separately for the Data Stewardship Wizard in Natural Repository Platform. So don't click Connect with eInfra. Click here, either in Czech or in English, depending on what your preferred language is. And perhaps Carolina has a very recent experience with logging in, so maybe she can correct me, but I believe it should be fairly straightforward. You should, I think, just input your credentials, and I believe it was something like hit agree, and then there was one more screen where you accept the terms of the services. And it should end with screens telling you, yes, we have registered you for dmp.eosk.cz. Let me know once you manage to go through that. I see some nods. Even if you're already in eInfra services, you need to hit that register and go through the registration process. Sorry, I don't have the screenshots for that. Who has already gone through the registration process? Raise your hands. Quite a few of you. I'm going to give the others some more time and we'll troubleshoot if necessary. If there's any problem or you don't know what to do, please do ask. And now I'm going to get rid of the slideshow and I'm going to open this in a new tab. You won't be seeing any projects here. And what I want you to do is hit Create Project. You can name it whatever you like. Let's put it Demo late November 2025. And you currently only have 2 project templates. And let's choose the Horizon project template. And there'll be further additional templates as it continues, but as I said, this is currently only in pilot mode, so you can hit Create here. And you should see this little form here. All right. I have 3 different tasks. The first one will be just to get accustomed to the software and what it can do, what it doesn't do. What I'd like you to do is I just introduce you to the general layout so that you know where to look at. I'll have you play around with this a little bit. And then I'll talk about some more advanced features, and then we'll try to have you fill in some data sets. We'll be ignoring this part for a while. We just look at the main screen over here. I'll collapse the sidebar on the left so that it doesn't obstruct my view. Remember I talked about DMP being a living document which changes? I can track the different phases by clicking the current phase part. It's important because choosing the correct phase changes what the software recommends to me to fill in. We have already noticed that we have, in the first chapter, research projects, I have this one in red, which generally indicates, right, whoa, wait a second. This one has a sand clock, so this can be answered later. And then we have one more possibility. Once we fill this in, it will turn to a green check mark. So what I'd like you to do is to, add a contributor. I'll delete this again. Yeah, I'll remove this item. You can add how many contributors you want. I'll try to add yourself. Try to see if you can find your ORCID identifier. Try to choose a role you feel that you should follow in the project. One more thing about phases. This is important because it's going to be in green. Notice what happens in these chapters. I have this number over there on the left. Research project 1, it means there's one question that needs to be answered in this part of the project. If I change the phases, the number changed. Can you see this? So it tracks, depending on what kind of phase you choose, it's going to highlight different questions for you that need to be answered in this particular type. We are before submitting the proposals, and there are some funding agencies that want you to submit some sort of DMP, even with a proposal. So you'll see that it will be fairly bare bones. But you should have a good idea about contributors. So try to fill in a name, an ORCID, your affiliation. So we do have here Institute of Physics of the Slovak Academy of Sciences. And I'm going to type a random ORCID. Okay. I presume Vladislav Smilka is not here from the Kyiv National University of Construction and Architecture. If he were here, we could have put his ORCID over there. And of course, name, email, and so on. You'll see that some entries are connected to these databases, so it again helps you verify that you have the right person, right institution, right kind of repository, and so on and so on. I feel that I don't need to explain these, that there are different chapters. I'll just explain this bar over here and the share button. Very straightforward. What is neat about Data Stewardship Wizard that you always can share the project with anyone. It can be a public link. You can set the different levels of what the person can do with the link. Just like with a Microsoft Word format. You can also add to-dos, comments, and version history. So you can add to-do here by clicking this part here, and you'll mark this as something which needs to be done. You can add comments for everyone to see, and if you are logged in person, or you have this shared with comment, anyone can comment on the project, anyone else will be able to comment on this. And you can, of course, also have version history, complete version history. You don't even need to save anything. Every single change is saved. You can retrace any single change you make. So let's say I don't want Vladislav over here. I can revert to this version. It asks me if I want to do that, if I want to go there, and it can be undone. And I go there. You can also name versions. So once you pass an important milestone, you can say, hey, this is version 0.1, for example. You can also filter it to display named versions only, so the major milestones.
How to name it?
You click the three dots next to the time, and you say name this version, and you can say, let's say 0.1. My first DMP. Yay! And exclamation marks. And this is the version 0.1. Sorry, can you? If you want me to revert this step again, I can do that. Again, you click this button here, and you click revert this to this version. You can of course make migrate the projects to a different version. You can also make copies. So, well, maybe I can show it now. If you go to projects, and you will see just your little project, and you can hit clone. It will create a clone. It will ask about the knowledge models, which currently just answer yes. And we could create a complete clone of that. If you want to change any settings, you go to the top bar, and it says settings over here. You can change the name anytime. I also mentioned that the DSW can generate a resulting document in different formats. PDF, Microsoft Word, HTML, for different, I don't think they're currently, okay, let's see, yes. For the machine actionable, are they common standards? We have also JSONs and different formats. You need to make sure you save any changes you make here. And if you really, really dislike your current DMP, you can go to, at the very bottom, to this part labeled danger zone and delete this project. Generally, I would advise against doing so. Right? I do have samples of complete DMPs, which I will show you later. I will also talk about these metrics and previews. But I think it's better to show it with a complete DMP. So for the time being, I would like, let's go back to the slides, and I will go to the first exercise, and where you'll talk about, well, we'll see. This is just, especially for those who can't see what, what the people present here are doing on their computers, project phases, project ownerships, document exports, very straightforward, and versioning. This is everything we talked about. It shows here the different phase as a visualization, chapters, phases. This is what we discussed. Kinds of questions, mandatory questions. Green with a check mark means it's answered, and optional question. Once the chapter has a check mark, again, you've completed everything you need at this stage. And some answer types, this is straightforward. These are metrics, and I'll be skipping this, because we'll get to that once we'll do the exercise. And this is the exercise. How much you want to be engaged with this, I'll leave up to you. But well, I have 2 tasks. We'll see how much time we'll have after the first one. We may do both. We may do just one. What I'd like you to do is the following. You are reusing an existing data set, and I want you to enter it into the chapter 2, which is labeled reusing data. It's going to be one of the freely available data sets from the CERAS data set by NASA, which stands for Clouds and Earth's Radiant Energy System, which tracks weather and heat energy, basically. Very, very dumbed down explanation. What's important about this data set is that the data set is in a format which allows for immediate use, so you don't need to do any conversion. It has versions. It's versions, so you know which version you're using, and you'll be using the latest version, which is the 4.2.1. And it's a data set called Serious Energy Balance and Filled, or EBAF, monthly means data in net CDF. which also, the last word is also important. It's going to also ask you, Data Stewardship Wizard, what are you going to do if a newer version of the data set is going to be published? You will answer that you will continue your work with the new set, but you won't change any previous work that you've done on the older data sets. And bonus part, or bonus round, if you manage to end quickly, try to find who is the owner of the data set and license, and what is the format of the data and the amount. I'll give you several minutes for this, and I'll be monitoring your progress. And we'll see how that goes well with you. If you encounter any sort of issue, just let me know. And okay, let's take a look at the sample entry. And I was also notified that the DOI doesn't actually resolve, which is interesting. And if that's the case, maybe NASA has problems in their data management and should step up their game. But let's take a look. Okay, I need to find the correct link, and I believe that should be, yes, sorry, this one. Okay, so this is how it should be. So you are going to be answering, yes, you have pre-existing data, or you're going to reuse someone's data. You can enter data sets or large collections of data individually. So here I entered the Clouds and Earth Data Entry System, and I said, yes, it has a persistent identifier, and I copy-pasted this one. Because I found it on the website, it has this over here. Let's try to actually resolve the DOI, if it really is broken or not. Okay, and I think it's not submitted, and it works for me. The DOI works for me. So I think in that case, NASA doesn't need to step out of the game. That's good. We said we'll be using this data. Of course, we will be using this. Who maintains or curates? It's, of course, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA. That's the owner of the data. I didn't input the approximate data volume in gigabytes, but I think if I download this, it should be, it was around, okay, I think we can read. How much? Yeah, 2 gigabytes. Yeah, it's someplace in this information, or if you sign in, you can download this. Okay, but we don't need to consider with that. What you need to do is to know what the condition is. And I answered, and this is an interesting use case. I answered CC BY, but it doesn't have the CC BY license. Oops, deny all. I've used the Copernicus website of the European Union, and it has also all kinds of licenses there can be. As you see, the CC BY licenses, they're only one of many. But this is the NASA policy. And we can read this. NASA's data policy ensures that all NASA data are available fully, openly, and without restrictions. And it has further policy, fully licensed information below, which to me feels like CC BY license. So I chose this one, right? It's something which is freely available. I just quote the source. That's it. And then some questions about what we will use the dataset for. I mean, as I said, there are some questions which perhaps. You don't necessarily have to answer everything, right? It's just a tool. But I just said, yeah, we'll be, of course, comparing with our data sets. It is versioned. We'll be using the 4.2.1. And I've clicked here, as it said in the prompt, new analysis will be done with the new version, right? If the new version of data set is here, any future analysis will be done with that version. And we know the format, and it's the netcdf. Did anyone figure this out? It's the netcdf format? It says netcdf4, even so. Okay. -4. So maybe you can add it as a -4 there, but I think netcdf is just enough. And we can directly use it is something that I've added here. And I said, yeah, I wanted to answer why not. Who will use this data set? And it's my buddy, Albert Einstein. We're buddies here, and it doesn't contain any sensitive data. Does this correspond to basically what you've also completed? Yeah. Of course, I mean, I know this was a difficult exercise because you're probably not familiar with the site, and navigating that is tricky, right? Once you'll be using data sets from your subfields, they should be fairly quickly. I'll go back here, and I want to show a raise of hands. We've been here for about 80 minutes. I have one more task for you, but then I'll talk about maybe 10 minutes more. So, do you want one more task? Yes? One more task? All right, okay. Okay. This time, chapter 10, preserving data. This should be a bit more straightforward. You don't have to look up things online. So, you have multiple data sets, but you have only a single data preservation strategy. Meaning, you don't have data sets which are freely available data sets which have sensitive data. Only just one preservation strategy. You'll be using tape storage medium on a remote storage site, so it's outside of your building. There's physical access protection, so not a random person. So a random person just can't walk in and just access the service. And only a limited number of people have access to the servers. The data doesn't need to be encrypted. There's nothing really sensitive. It will be stored for 10 years. You will also run so-called cold storage once the funding of the project ends, which will be maintained for additional 15 years. One of the project partners will pay for that. Yippee, it's not your institution, that's great. And they will also be responsible for all cold storage policies. Now, if the data is being used, if they are getting still requests about the data, which will not happen in some fields, will happen in other fields, we have budget for extension of the cold storage. So if researchers keep using the data, we can say, hey, oh, that's great. We can add a few more years. Do you also have, notice the budget you have. You also have budget for updating the storage media if that's necessary. But you won't be changing any data formats or anything like this. So again, very detailed data preservation strategy. As I said, you don't necessarily need to complete every single thing. Just complete what makes sense for you. But I would expect an average data management plan to complete two-thirds of the information here. Maybe the last 2 points not that vital. Okay, I'm going to give you a few more minutes. So that's chapter 10, preserving data. And then I'll show you a bunch of DMPs completed, and we'll talk about any kind of support and what can be done to make things easier, and what will be done also. Because as I said, you're working on the pilot of DSW here. All right, let's quickly check the answers to this little task. And then we have, want to say a few more slides to go. That's true, but also I want to show you a sample of a completed DMP, and we'll talk about how to make things easier. So I think that was chapter 10, data preservation, right? So this version of the Data Stewardship Wizard asks me to label the data preservation strategy, and it says, I'm going to click here. It's consistently, I don't have several data preservation strategies. It's for all of these. I'll be having cold storage. Data is not changing over time, so it doesn't need re-archiving. It asks me about the storage type. Yeah, we can fill this in. This is definitely one of those which is not that important. But I decided to answer it and said tape. It is stored in a remote location. And it is also protected against loss or theft, which I completed here. It said it's not encrypted, but it's clearly delimited who has physical access to the archives. I don't answer these questions because I decided, well, I don't need to do this currently, so I skip those. And it says, yes, we know who's handling the archival matters. We have a fixed period for 10 years. It's going to be reusable still after that because it's in standardized format. We have cold storage. We have the participating institution budgeting it for 15 years. It can be extended if it makes sense. That is, if people actually request the data, right? We're not going to extend it if there's nothing else. I left this one. I left this one empty, but I guess we could answer no here. And I said it's going to, if we upgrade the hardware, then yeah, sure, it's going to be updated. Questions, comments about the answers? Yes, and yeah, it said in the.
I don't have it like in this questionnaire.
Oh, you don't have it there. Oh, interesting. Anyone else doesn't have it there?
The option appears when you say yes for something. No, I mean, options are coming up based on the answers.
Yes, I think it's because you have, if you haven't answered this question here about the extension of the period, archival period, then it's not going to show up. All right? If we're going to say no, then we have different sets of questions. We have only one. Yeah, sorry, it's a it's a question with 4B3, and if you don't answer yes, then you don't get to. Sorry, no, it's the no, sorry, it's the previous one. It's this one. If you didn't answer the cold storage, then you don't have this question over here. But if you don't answer yes, it's the question. Yeah, it should have soon search function embedded in here in this bar, so it makes search for this a bit more challenging. But X1A3 asks about cold storage, and so if you answer yes, it's going to ask. It should ask also this question, and it asks about the medium, and you can collapse it or expand it. It's B1 is the archive data changing over time, and B2 should be will the archive be stored on disk or tape? Does anyone have a different question there?
I have like a HTTP1, those archives stored in the
Okay. then in that case, we may have to, you know what, maybe we can check after, once we're done, so that I know if there's anything wrong with that. The numbering of can change depending on whether you answered previously yes or no. So that's something, so that's important to take in mind. But if you answered like this, you should have the questions over there. Yeah, I think we should be using the same knowledge model and the template. So yeah, I'll take a look at that once we're done, because I can't determine now why you have a different question there, but that's odd. Anyone else has the same problem? A few more people. Who does have the question there on with the tapes, with the medium? Who has the question there? Raise your hands. No one. That's weird. That is odd. Oh, right. Yes. Now I understand. Yeah, I know why you have it here. Okay. Remember when I talked about that you can filter the questions? Yes, I'm a dummy. If you chose the Horizon Europe DMP, which I told you to do, and I forgot that these two questions don't have this tag here, meaning you will not see them if you choose, when you open, I'm going to show it up again. When you create, you say, whatever, test, you have a template here, and actually I didn't have to. In the settings, you will have filtered by question tags. It's going to say Horizon Europe DMP, meaning, oops, sorry, I need to go back to my projects, meaning that, and I don't have it here, I'm using all questions. So even questions not necessary for Horizon Europe will show up in my questionnaire, but not yours. So my apologies. So then in that case, that should solve the.
How do we disable this?
It's. I'm going to answer. The question is, how do you disable this filtering? I would say don't disable it. It's not necessary. You will, and this is why you would have more questions there. And as I said, I feel like this is this is one of those questions which is not completely necessary for you to determine where you store your data. But if you want to do so, you will have here, you go to settings. You'll have your knowledge model, and you'll have here, instead of all questions used, you'll have here Horizon Europe DMP. Because when you created the project, it said use Horizon Europe template, so that's why it filtered the questions out for you. And you'll just click create migration. It will show you this window over here, and you'll choose filter by question tags, and you'll choose this. Or unclick this in your case. Were you able to follow? So there is no option for migration. A new knowledge model can be chosen. Huh, this is weird. So this one is empty. Interesting. On the right. Huh, interesting. Okay. That shouldn't happen, but maybe they're in progress updating something, so it doesn't show up, but that's how it works. This is how it's going to show up. So we got slightly derailed, my apologies for that, but yeah, that's if you didn't see the cold storage question, that's the reason. You filtered it with using the Horizon Europe tags, and that's why it didn't show up. But generally, this filtering is very useful because you want to show you want to display the questions that are only relevant to you. Anyways, let's go back on track a little bit. You may have noticed that as we were working on, and I need to open this again, on the chapter data preservation, we've noticed some of these metrics, right? It talks about accessibility, good DMP practice, and so on and so on. I'm going to show you some more advanced functions of the Data Stewardship Wizard, and we'll be finishing, I hope, in 15 minutes. If you click metrics, it's going to show you a summary report of not only fair metrics, but general good practice. This is a different questionnaire, by the way. This is not the one that you have in front of you, but you can also maybe do it. You know what? Let's do it with the one we filled in. I have something like this. Currently, we are still in the pilot mode, so it doesn't track all the metrics for all questions. This will soon change, which is why I'm showing you a slightly different version, and it has more of these metrics. Remember here, why I'm telling you this, remember one more thing, which is green doesn't mean better. That's not true. Or it does, but not for you. It will make sense. A low measure can make sense for you depending on what kind of research you do. So for example, if you have a lot of personal data or sensitive data, or you aim for commercial application, you will have very low reusability. Because you will choose, well, I don't want my data to be used because it's limited in its use. And that's okay. The tool will say you have low reusability, but it's not a bad thing because it makes sense for you. Does this sound logical? Right? It will not interpret whether it makes sense for your research to have, applying for a patent or not. So it would show, if you were applying it for a patent and fill this in, it would show low reusability, but that's okay. Also, these metrics are not shown to funding organization, grant providers. This is just for you to get some sort of idea. But as I said, you need to interpret it against your own research. There'll be research which will have, maybe low reusability, perhaps if it's very specific, fairly low interoperability, that's possible. I would expect generally that findability, accessibility should be in the midst to fairly high, but reusability definitely can be very low. Anyways, very brief overview of a questionnaire. I've inputted some random names, like Jan Novak over here. You'll see it has fewer chapters. It runs on a slightly different knowledge model. And what's important here is that I can, create a document here. So I click New Document. I'm going to say, okay, it's going to be a PDF document. I'm going to create this. It says in very small font, it's queued. Now I can copy. I can click this, and we'll see if it shows up in the browser, and it creates a document. I can also directly, if I choose HTML or PDF, I can just click Preview. It's going to open directly in the tool. And this is how this looks like. I don't have version history. I didn't name versions, so it doesn't show up here. If I did so, it would name the versions for me. It has the list of contributors, description of the project, and all the chapters the DMP has. All the text here is, or almost all the text here is generated by the tool. It's nothing you write. So, for example, description of the formats, this is generated by the tool. Description of DOIs and how we share this, how we make things accessible, again, something which is just generated by the tool. Most of the things here you see is generated by the tool with very little input by the user. Yeah, I think that's about it. I'll go back to my slides very briefly. And I don't think I need to show different completed DMPs. And let me check if we've gone through all of the more advanced features. I think that was pretty much it, yeah. Okay. And the metrics over here. Very briefly on future developments of DSW NRP, there will be some modifications of the knowledge model. As I said, it's still in pilot mode, so some of the questions might change. I would expect that it will get shortened a bit. We'll also work on translations. We also expect integrations with NRP services, with the services of the National Repository Platform and the repositories. So in the future, and I cannot give you a specific date yet, But in the future, we expect that some of the things you fill in will be automated, right? And so what will happen is that, for example, you'll upload your data to a specific repository. By this, you will join a community of your fellow researchers in your fellow fields. And since the repository will have some specific metadata standard and licenses, this will be already pre-filled in the DMP in the Data Stewardship Wizard. You'll just say that, yes, that's what you use. I don't think there will be a ton of the entries filled in beforehand for you, but it will be the ones which are generally the most difficult. Things like metadata standards, licenses, so aspects of the data management planning which researchers generally have problems with. So in the future, we expect a good amount of automation so that you don't need to manually click every single thing. And I mentioned that search available. It's already in the Elixir instance available. It's not yet in the DSW National Repository Platform. Cross-referencing question may not be that exciting to you, but if you like, we haven't seen it yet, but very soon you'll have able to just search within the DMP, which will make things quite useful. We need to finish soon, so I will be skipping this part here. And now, it was quite a lot of work, right? Yes or no? Yes. I mean, it's nice as a questionnaire, but you still need to complete things. And as I said, I hope that there will be, a good amount of this will be automated as possible. I also hope that in the future, perhaps, and this is my wishful thinking, this is not a plan, any. But my wishful thinking is that if we get across funders in the Czech Republic, if we get a more streamlined version of the DMP, which doesn't necessarily need to go into that much detail, that will be also wonderful. So we perhaps see, shorter knowledge models in the Data Stewardship Wizard as well. But also, you have people to help you with managing your research data, and also with data management planning and data management plans, and those are data stewards. It's a new kind of research role. It's a data specialist or data management specialist, which has been slowly emerging in the last couple of years, oftentimes from the ranks of librarians or open science specialists. And they serve as a bridge between researchers, the institutions, and the technology. So they should have an understanding of the recent trends. For example, knowing that something like Data Stewardship Wizard exists. Also, new developments in open science research and requirements. And they help researchers with quality of data and compliance with policies and so on and so on. I think you can read the description over here. What's important to mention is that you have all kinds of data stewards. So we have a little graphic over here on the right. Also notice this little mascot here. This is I would say, official mascot of the Czech community of data stewards, which I'll talk about briefly. He or she doesn't have a name yet, which is a shame. I like to call him Fairdalf, as Gandalf the wizard. So Fairdalf, he has a little wizard hat. But maybe we'll have to decide on a name yet. What's important here is that you have all types of data stewards. And depending on their role in the institution, they may do different things for the researchers. So the more towards the central or institutional data steward there is, the more they will be concerned with things like compliance with legislation and policies and creating data policy at the institution. The more toward the project or team level the data steward will be oriented, the more in touch with data itself and working with data will be. So there are various researchers and various data stewards. From the spectrum of someone who's running a lot of workshops and making sure that the institution policies make sense, making sure that researchers understand what a DOI or ORCID is. On the end of the spectrum is someone who really works with the research teams and helps them clean data, helps them work with, for example, with GitHub, helps them work with machine readable and actionable file formats, helps them automate some of the process that they're working on. For example, naming files and the data they get. So it very varies, but they are here for you depending on what you need and what kind of data steward you're looking for. We have on the Check EOSC website, if you go to eosc.cz and you click Communities Data Stewards, or you just type into Google eosc.cz Data Stewards, you'll get there as well, very easily. You have a map of data stewards. And as I mentioned, a community of data stewards is fairly large. It has, I think, over 200, maybe nearly 300 people on the official Discord channel, where data stewards share tips and helpful tips and information, troubleshoot stuff. About a third of them also registered for our map of data stewards, which you can always visit. And currently, it registers 3 people at the Institute of Physics as being data stewards at your institution. And also, I've noticed that there is a job posting for a data steward at the Cukrovarnicka. And this is a description here. It's only in Czech, so I can't translate that for you. Sorry, I can use the English translation there. But the description makes it clear that they're looking for someone more institution-oriented. So internal rules, helping with data management plans, helping with support, understanding research data management, licenses, and different tools, and some expectations. That will be almost all from me. So before I talk about these links and contacts, so I'll just brief recap of what I hope this was for you. We had this little intro about the road to FAIR and DMP, so that you understand it's just not a requirement of a funder, but also that we use these, or these were created as naturally. These stemmed from a natural need of research communities. And why? So that we hopefully can share data better. That's it. DMP is a document, but ideally, the idea behind it is to follow the data management planning, which is going through the set of questions and just asking yourself, okay, what do I do with the data? What happens with the data? Where is it stored? Who has access to it? How is it described? Is it in a standardized format? How do I make it available to others? Do I have to choose a repository? What happens? And the goal is to realize that perhaps, hey, there are different ways of doing things. It can be quite a lot of work, but I would argue, based on my experience, that it also helps researchers realize something about their data and research that they haven't realized yet. And we have tools to help, which is one of them is Data Stewardship Wizard. Of course, there are other tools which help with writing DMPs, but Data Stewardship Wizard is the one which is freely available in the Czech Republic in the context of National Repository Platform. It's still in pilot mode, but it should be accessible by pretty much everyone. And so we'll be tailoring it yet. And finally, our data stewards for you available who will try to help you with making you understand what licenses are, with making you understand what kind of repositories are there, with helping you write a DMP, but also potentially with working with the data, perhaps helping with automating or cleaning the data sets that you work. It's going to depend on what their expertise is, because as I showed, the expertise can be fairly wide. Now, some useful links and contacts, the same slide that my colleague Michal said. Michal showed you as well. I'll finish with one more thing. I hope you found this beneficial, at least somewhat. And what I'd really like to get is feedback from you. I almost said I don't care what kind of feedback it is. I do care. But whether it's positive or negative, please do share it. Whether you want to email me directly, at the email over there. Or you want to email maybe the training center at the email address in the middle. I would really appreciate getting feedback from you so that I know what works, what do you appreciate it, and also I know what could be done, for example, better next time, or what you missed. So if you could spend a few more minutes writing an email, that would be great. If not, that's all from me. Thank you very much for your attention, and it was great seeing you work here, and I hope to see you sometime soon, and have a great rest of Friday and a beautiful weekend. Thank you.